Hey guys, Paul here. So today I wanted to talk about a question that I've seen posed a lot on the internet recently in trading card game spaces, and that is the idea that we're maybe in a bit of a trading card game bubble, right? This idea that there are so many new trading card games that have been coming out over the last couple of years, and also that the hype and interest around them has been like rapidly increasing, but perhaps that it will soon reach a limit and all this is going to fall apart. All these new games that are coming out are going to just suddenly fail, not have an audience. There's going to be a lot of like overprinted product that's not worth anything. And just generally speaking, interest in trading card games will flatline and that'll be the end of the story. And that's obviously a big simplification of the whole situation. And that's kind of why I'm making this video. I will say out the gate though, I don't have any like broad answer to whether or not we're in a trading card game bubble. I have not actually lived through like any other card game bubbles. Like a lot of people talk about kind of the late 90s, early 2000s ones. I was not old enough to remember that. So, I mean, I played Yu-Gi-Oh like in 2002, but I don't know that much about like how that all played out. So I can't speak to it from like personal experience. What I can talk about are some of the trends that I've noticed today and how I sort of feel about them. And then I want to hear what other people think. So I think that when it comes to like trading card games now, yes, there are a lot of trading card games, but I actually feel like they are each coming from like not each, but like they're coming from different places. Like it's not all coming from the same place. What I mean by that is this. You have very large established trading card games, your Magics, your Pokemons, your Yu-Gi-Ohs. These are games that have their own set of, new and old problems that they have like brought in through the years. We'll talk about those in a sec. Then you have what most consider like your kind of new contenders, an established IP that gets a trading card game. Mostly this comes from Bandai. That's your Digimon, your One Piece, your Union Arena, I guess counts as well, Gundam and all that stuff. But also, I think Disney Lorcana and Riftbound sort of fit into this category. Maybe you could say Star Wars Unlimited too. And then the third category is kind of the more like indie game that's sort of like I think of Flesh and Blood. I think of Elestrals. Sometimes these come from Kickstarters and stuff. Other times they just get crowdfunded some other way or crowdsourced some other way. And they're their own category that I think is largely actually separate from this, but related anywho. So I think with the big boys, with your Magics, your Yu-Gi-Ohs, your Pokemons, this is where like most of this conversation starts. Pokemon is the game that seems like it's like the umbrella card game. When you think of what's going well in card gaming or what's not going well and like this whole bubble conversation, it's usually the fact that like you see a video of Pokemon scalpers fighting over packs at Costco's and Targets, and you hear headlines about Walmart's having to like hide packs away. You think of Logan Paul and Pikachu and Charizard cards. You think about like PSA grading and all the controversies that come with that. I saw some headline about like GameStop is selling these Pokemon boxes for over MSRP and all of that stuff. I think a lot of that lies squarely with Pokemon. The thing about Pokemon though is that it's weird because even if the Pokemon like bubble bursts, which is to say like maybe scalpers finally overpurchase all this sealed product and eventually like they try to sell it to somebody and they just run out of people to actually sell it to and it all just sits and rots. Hey, good on them, they deserve it. But like I still think Pokemon will last and persist through all of that. Like Pokemon the card game, because the IP Pokemon is huge. It's the world's number one media franchise. Did you know? Like I think that like Pokemon can sort of survive anything, right? Like for the most part, it doesn't matter if things go right or wrong. Like Pokemon doesn't need to worry about not being able to get new players because it appeals to old people, but also like young people and kids. And so like as far as like active players go, I think Pokemon will like be all right. I also think that Magic the Gathering is in a similar boat, but it's a little bit different. Magic the Gathering is a game that has now been exploring a lot with collabs. People talk about Universes Beyond, and it's like meant to grab new people into Magic the Gathering. You were interested in Avatar: The Last Airbender, but you didn't really ever play Magic. Now you can. Now you have an excuse to. Same with Marvel, same with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Final Fantasy, and like every other thing that they do for Universes Beyond. I'm not so much like here to get into whether or not I like Universes Beyond. I don't have enough opinions on it to say. I mean, like I don't play that much Magic myself, but I do think that what Magic is sort of trying to do is like rapidly grow its player base, rapidly grow the interest base. I think that the only real like issue I see, like as far as it relates to a bubble, is just that the cost of sealed Magic the Gathering product has gone up a lot. And so it feels like they kind of print a lot of sets every year, but the products themselves are just a little bit more expensive. And so sometimes people might feel a bit priced out. That's the impression that I've gotten. Magic also has a separate issue of like, I hear like, standard formats and stuff like this. The competitive formats are feeling very vacant. Like it feels like a lot of the attention is on Commander, but I don't know I can't say if that's like true or if that's happening or not, but that's just sort of something that I've heard. Still, though, I think that as it relates to the bubble, the worst you could say about Magic is just that it's kind of becoming or trying to maybe become more of a collector's game and like look more like resemble Pokemon when it used to maybe resemble something between Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh. So you get into Yu-Gi-Oh then, and Yu-Gi-Oh is the game that while people will talk about like a card game bubble happening because of these collector scalper problems and all that and like sealed product. Yu-Gi-Oh has no such issue like that. It has its own separate problems. Yu-Gi-Oh, no one is like chomping at the bit for sealed product right now. This is something I can say with certainty. People do not want mainline sets. They've all kind of dropped dead in value. It feels like this year, and I don't know that that's going to get any better. But also, people play Yu-Gi-Oh for the cards, like for the gameplay and the cards. They don't really play to like collect, or they don't. Sorry, they don't. They're not interested in Yu-Gi-Oh for the sake of like collecting and having a big like modern collection. You'll never find like a new Umbreon Charizard type of card in Yu-Gi-Oh. Not really. That just doesn't happen. I think that if a bubble were to burst in the card game space, Yu-Gi-Oh legitimately like wouldn't be affected for the reasons that other games be affected. Now, like that's not to say that Yu-Gi-Oh has like this. It doesn't isn't without its longevity issues. Game has virtually no on ramp. They're kind of trying to address that with starter and structure decks. So like I think that Yu-Gi-Oh might be one of those games that like unlike what I was describing with Pokemon and Magic, it might sort of I hate to use this extreme word. It might like die with this current generation. I don't mean die as in like Yu-Gi-Oh's dying, but like as in, it just doesn't get like new young faces. So theoretically, if time just continues to pass, there might not be a new set of like teens and stuff that get Yu-Gi-Oh cards, right? Like that's kind of my view of it. It's just like it's a game for 30-year-olds, and yeah, unless something changes with that. Okay, that's the big three, and I think that they do affect the perceived bubble the most, or at least that's what you'll hear the most about. But there's a totally separate addition as well, which is like these new IP based card games. I think these play a role of like making people feel the effects of like every IP now is getting a card game. You combine Magic the Gathering always having a new Universes Beyond with just like One Piece TCG, Dragon Ball, Digimon, Union Arenas covering a bunch of different anime. Then you got Lorcana and you got Riftbound, and it can make it seem crowded, right? I think that all these games are generally pretty good. I don't play many Bandai games directly, but I know like Alec does. He talked about them a lot to me. He feels like the worst thing you can kind of say about Bandai games is that they just run together, like in terms of how the cards look and feel. But I do think that they are games that people seem to legitimately enjoy both playing and collecting. So they strike a nice middle ground. I almost feel like most Bandai games have sort of they feel like they've replaced, or not replaced, but like they're like this amalgamation of what you sort of like about both Yu-Gi-Oh, which is like the gameplay, and like Pokemon, where it's like mostly the card collecting, and Magic in terms of like getting cool alt arts and stuff of like your IPs, which Pokemon has that too, but I'm generalizing here. I think Bandai games mostly strike a pretty good middle ground, so I don't have anything terribly negative to say. Maybe just that like it seems like they kind of release a new game every year, and it might be good if they would slow that down a little bit because it can self cannibalize a lot. Like local card shops not being able to host every like being able to host like One Piece and Gundam and Digimon because like they all come from Bandai, and so they all receive the same like the support's coming from the same place, but like there's just not enough days in the weekend to have to host all those games. That's not like TCG bubble gonna burst levels of like urgency or anything, but it is something that I notice. Um, However, when you add in like Riftbound and Lorcana into the equation, I do see where like the fatigue could start to set in for people at large. Like, are you expected to play all of these games? Like, you have to kind of divide up your time. And Disney is like a large, not even like one IP, set of IPs, I would say. And same with like League of Legends Riftbound. That one's new. I don't know a lot about it. Something that I can say about this though is that Riftbound it has released with some issues at the start. Like I've heard a lot about card print quality not being very good, people not getting their pre-orders, a lot of erratas actually for the game early on, so that maybe sort of suggests that it might have been like rushed to market somewhat. But when I hear people talk about the gameplay of Riftbound, they seem to like it. So I hesitate to say that like, okay, Riot Games just released this strictly to cash in on the TCG market and then dip, because that's what like you hear a lot of people say is like these new card games come out, their first set sells out, it's full of scalpers and stuff, and then like the card game just crashes and burns. I mean like people seem to like playing Riftbound, so I don't think that's gonna happen. Like it doesn't look that way to me. However, the last category, I guess, that we should talk about is the like Kickstarter game, the crowd-funded game. These are weird because I gave it one category, but as I'm talking about it now, I almost feel like even that's way too broad strokes painting. So like that game Altered TCG, that was a really big Kickstarter, but I also heard that like earlier this year it had its some issues with like the way that it's been like crowdfunded and stuff, and that they were running out of money, and the game wasn't profitable. If someone can give me the details on that, I would love to hear more about it because I'm kind of ignorant as it is right now. But that to me sort of sounds like maybe what I think of when I think of like card game bubbles from this angle, where it's like games that get a lot of crowdfunding but aren't able to persist because the space is just generally crowded. So like Altered TCG is one I've heard of. Grand Archive came out a couple years ago, so it's not like as new. That's a fun one. I've played Grand Archive. I like it. I don't hear much about it anymore. I don't know if it's like thriving or not. It feels like it might have gotten sort of lost in the shuffle. Then you have Illustrals, which is a game that has taken off and done really well, but it still feels more gameplay focused. And the more I think about it, I guess, really. Oh, and Flesh and Blood. Flesh and Blood it seems like it's doing well. It actually seems like my understanding is that it kind of serves the competitive Magic player who feels left behind by Wizards and Hasbro and all this Universes Beyond stuff and the cancellation of a lot of their competitive circuits. I've heard that a lot of those people have like shifted to Flesh and Blood. When I say it all like this, I think what the TCG bubble really comes down to, in my very not super expert opinion, but anecdotal opinion, is whether your game is about collecting and like hype and that sort of thing, like getting the cards because they look cool or feel rare or the sealed product is worth a lot, versus playing. A card game can fall into either the collecting part or the playing part. The playing games seem to be like Illustrals, Flesh and Blood, Yu-Gi-Oh, One Piece, and most of the Bandai games sort of feel that way too. And then the collecting side is like your Pokemon, your universes beyond Magic, maybe some aspect of Bandai games like with their alt arts, but it doesn't seem like that gets too bad. I think that usually tends to peter out after their early sets. Like early Gundam was really hard to find, early One Piece was really hard to find, but now that stuff's mostly normalized. And yeah, like it feels like those are like the two sides of it that I see is like, are you a game for collectors or are you a game for players? And it's like a real question mark mostly with new games when they come out. Like Riftbound has had some really high prices and some like product issues, but I think that it's still going to probably end up going the way of Bandai games, where like that collector scalper problem is only mostly at the start, and they're going to get it under control, and it's going to be a player game. So yeah, that's what it feels like. It's like I don't want to make it a binary, but like it's like either you're meant to play this game or you're meant to like scalp this game, and it's one or the other. And the ideal game sort of walks a line in the middle, because if you're like too much of one or too much of the other, then it's still pretty tough to survive because there's competition regardless. Like, Yu-Gi-Oh is a player game, but it also still has to contend with other player games like your Riftbound, like your Flesh and Blood, like your there's another one that I was gonna say, but yeah, those games, One Piece. Like I don't know. I guess I say all this to say that I'm not actually even sure that there's a bubble like that's going to burst, so much as it is a limited amount of people. I don't think that we're getting a lot of new faces into card games. Like it's all like 30-year-olds kind of just being shuffled around the same pastures. And that makes me think that like that doesn't feel like bubble territory. Like the bubble part, I think, is the scalpers. But I don't know that like that's going to actually affect most card games. Like I actually think that that's just like a mostly Pokemon issue. Like it doesn't actually seem like it's like that bad for other games, but I don't know. So basically, I've circled around this whole topic, not landed on an answer. What's new on this channel? But it has made me think about it more, and like sometimes just getting my thoughts out there, like verbally, helps me sort of rationalize it in my head. So I want to hear from everybody else. Do you think that we are actually in a trading card game bubble? Which games do you think are most affected by it? Does it really affect your game of choice? Again, I don't see like this bubble affecting Elestrals or Flesh and Blood or even Yu-Gi-Oh, but I do see it affecting Magic and Pokemon and like any given new game for its first half year to a year. That's sort of my thesis on it. Okay, hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you think about this conversation. Real quick thing too, this chair that I'm using, this is an Ewin racing chair. These are actually on sale for Black Friday. They sponsor the podcast, and so if you use the code APS, you can actually get 30% off on one of them if you were looking to upgrade your gaming chair. They come in a lot of different colors. This is the Flash XL version. They're cool because they can go up and down and lean all around and spin all around, and they're great and they look nice and it's a fun time. So yeah, you can let them know I sent you. All right, I'll see you guys in the next one. Fast turn.